one more second. All right. Okay. Good evening. Welcome to the New York Studio School's virtual evening lecture series. Tonight, we are very, very pleased to be presenting Always Believe the Good, a conversation between artist Jim Condron and painter Amy Sherald. I would like to thank Jim, and I would like to thank Amy for joining us. I know it's a very busy time, and I would just like to also say I can't think of a better way to end our first virtual evening lecture series and the fall semester lecture series. Really looking forward to this talk since we put it together. And I would like to thank all of you out in the audience as well for it, whether this is the first time you're joining the New York Studio School or if you've participated in a lot of our lectures. It wouldn't be possible without you creating this community, and so we are very grateful for that. I would also like to quickly thank the generous support that we receive in part by public funds from the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs in partnership with the City Council, the Robert Lehman Foundation, and many individual contributors. Please do consider making a donation during or after tonight's talk by clicking on the support button on our homepage at www.nyss.org. Before I introduce our speakers, I would like to also just first point out at the bottom of your screen is a Q&A button. Feel free to click on that and type in a comment or question at any time during the talk, and we'll leave extra time at the end to field some questions. If you're joining us on YouTube, you can do the same in the comments section underneath the screen, and we'll get those questions as well. So without further ado, our speakers tonight are Jim Condron's works fuse painting and sculpture. His pieces tangle personal history, art history, and his menacing obsession with collecting salvaged objects that resonate with vernacular associations. Originally from Long Island, Jim attended the New York Studio School and earned his MFA at the Hofburger School of Painting of the Maryland Institute College of Art. Jim is the recipient of a Pollock Krasner Foundation grant, an Adolf and Esther Gottlieb Foundation grant, and has been awarded numerous residencies. And Amy Sherald is a painter, and through her monumental portraits of African-American subjects, she explores alternative narratives of blackness through the exclusion of color from the notion of race. The Baltimore-based artist is best known for her stylized figurative paintings of vibrantly dressed individuals rendered in grayscale skin tones against flat, highly saturated backgrounds that evoke a sense of timeless identity. Amy Sherald was the first woman and first African-American ever to receive first prize in the 2016 Outwin Boochever Portrait Competition from the National Portrait Gallery in Washington, D.C. In February 2018, the museum unveiled her portrait of former First Lady Michelle Obama. She has several other awards, including in 2014, she was awarded the Joan Mitchell Foundation Painters Grant. In 2017, the Anonymous was a Woman Award, and in 2019, the Smithsonian Ingenuity Award. Alongside her painterly practice, Amy Sherald has worked for almost 2 decades alongside socially committed creative initiatives, including teaching art in prisons and art projects with Baltimore youth. And with that, please join me in a virtual welcome for Amy Sherald and Jim
Condron. Thanks, Sam. And big thank you to Dean Graham Nixon and the Studio School for hosting this great talk. And of course, a huge thanks to Amy for taking the time out of your intense schedule as you prepare for, you know, a new great upcoming show. We're super excited to talk to you about your work. Amy and I were graduate students together at the Maryland Institute College of Art from 2002 to 2004. And I vividly remember like walking into her studio on the first day, and immediately I knew that she was friendly, welcoming, engaged, and genuine. It's those qualities that I see in her work, which speak to so many people around the world. Her paintings reflect the depth of who she is and her seriously intensive work ethic. I'm proud to call her my friend, and I'm excited to share this conversation with you. So the way I want to direct the questions tonight is to do some formal questions, so some technical questions, and then get into sort of more meaning. So the first one I have, I want you to walk us through the nuts and bolts of making a painting. So you can geek out if you want, and you get to choose the painting, start to finish. What do you do?
Okay. Are you gonna show a painting, or I'm just gonna like?
Yeah. So Sam, well, if you choose one of the ones Sam can show.
That's so hard. Okay. Yeah. We'll just do this one.
Okay.
This one was 2008, and it was really a seminal piece for me because although I had finished, I believe, 2 paintings prior to this, like in this style, I had not quite solidified in my head that like this what exactly like the rest of the work was going to look like. So for me, the process starts with just finding a model, and I've up until a couple of years ago normally just find them while out living my life. So walking around the streets of Baltimore, on the subway in New York. And now, you know, since COVID, like it's kind of easy to find people on Instagram. But this young lady I met at the Walters Museum in Baltimore, and at that moment I was there for something else, and she just happened to walk up to me, and she had on this outfit, a white polyester skirt and a pink polyester top, but it had flowers on it. I changed it to polka dots. She was like over 6 feet tall. The hairstyle was the same, and her name was Joy. And when I saw her, I immediately knew that this was going to be my next painting. And so basically it's the approach. And I asked her if she wanted to come. She said yes. She comes to the studio. At that point, I believe I was probably photographing with disposable cameras, and I would take the picture and then go to the CVS and like drop the camera off and like get the pictures. I'm not even sure, because now I can't even imagine working from a photograph that was like this big. Like maybe it was like this big, but so I had her show up in the same thing that she wore, and I photographed her outside and probably in the hallway outside of my studio. I didn't really have now I'm a little more specific. Like I know I like to photograph outside. I know for the most part, I want it to be between like 9 a.m. and, you know, I don't know, like 11:15 a.m. in the morning. And all that changes based on my location. It was like a little bit different in Baltimore, but here in Jersey City, based on where the building is situated, like those are the times that I use. I photograph her, I print the picture out, and then I decide what color the background is going to be. That's the first thing I do. And that's usually based on the outfit. Back then, I had resolved my background and my lack of desire to like place the figure by using this kind of drip method with turpentine. So I still start all my paintings after gesso with a naphthol red as a base coat before anything. But when I was doing this work, I let that come through a little bit. And so I would paint it red, let it dry. I use liquid, so it's dry the next day. And and then a thinner coat of the blue color so that the turpentine or gamma-sol can really break through the surface. When I just kind of dip a brush into a jar and just kind of like shake it around.
I think I've seen you do that.
Yeah, it is you know, until you get an assistant, you don't really know how like specific things are. But I had an intern working with me, not during this painting, but another one, and I thought that it would be like something easy for her to do. But then when she started, I was like, this is all wrong. Like you can't, you know, so there's a randomness to it and a chaos, but it's got to be my own. So so I do that, and that dries, and then I size the image. These particular paintings, like the individual portraits, the size is always 54 by 43 inches. And so I knew that when I started making these portraits that I wanted them to be life size, or at least I wanted the faces to be life size. There was something that was really intriguing to me about that. But then I decided I was really, I guess, like disinterested with like having to figure out shoes and like the rest of it, because for me, the focal point was really the face and then kind of like the body language of the upper body. Mm-hmm. So this crop is specifically cropped for that reason, along with the fact that I needed a size that could be portable, where I wouldn't have to rent a U-Haul truck every time I needed to move a work. So the back of my friend's SUV, and this kind of worked between like two different kinds of SUVs. So I knew that like it was the size, I mean, and you know, when you're on a budget, those things matter. So I still work in that size. After I draw the painting, draw the figure onto the canvas, it's a really rough contour drawing. I get the photograph and then I really get the details of the face in. Everything else I kind of like paint in as I'm working on it. But I really like solidified,
You draw with paint or with something else?
I draw with charcoal, sorry. I draw with charcoal. So that way I can like wipe away and like get it as perfect as I want it. Sometimes I'll go over that with paint to really get it in, but most of the time I just start with the painting. And what I found that I have liked about painting over different colors is that, as you know, like the undercolor like really influences the color of the skin. So even though the complexions are gray, they still end up having like different undertones because of, you know, one might be green and one might be blue and then pink. Sometimes it's problematic, but usually after 3 or 4 coats of paint, it doesn't, you know, if there's an odd color change, it doesn't appear.
Yeah.
I think probably digitally the paintings look a little thinner than they actually are. I'm like a layer by layer by layer kind of person.
So the background goes in first though, right? I mean, the color of the background is chosen first, and then
the painting starts. And when I start, it's started. I've already made all the decisions, except for sometimes I may change a pattern or a color of a shirt if it doesn't work, something like that. But the figure never changes.
Right on. Okay, so then I have to ask you the classic question that everybody asks you, which is the grisaille.
Why?
Yeah, well, yeah, you can answer why, but we're gonna, you know, I've heard you answer it in the past, that it's really usually a technical, it's a sort of aesthetic decision first, and then it becomes, oh yes, this is like later on, you know why you're doing it. So yeah, if you could address it.
It was so it was the way that I started my paintings. I started into taking art classes like later on in college. So even though I was an art major in undergrad, I really only had about 2 years of it. And then by the time I get to grad school, like nobody's really teaching you how to paint. So I kind of feel like I'm self-taught because I had to figure out a lot of these things on my own and just by talking to other artists. So I had a friend at the time that suggested that I start the paintings with this kind of grisaille. so I tried it and I thought it was too silver, and then I tried it with Naples yellow. So my magic potion is like Mars Black, Gambling Mars Black, and Naples Yellow Old Holland.
Yeah, that's
Because it's warm, like really rich, I don't know, like soft, and it feels really fleshy to me. It doesn't feel very cold. And the first painting I did it, and I thought it looked cool, so I kept doing it. I really didn't think about the whys until later, but in thinking back, I did realize that I felt I didn't want to feel like I was cornering myself because I was making paintings of Black people. I didn't want the conversation to be always politicized and marginalized to race and identity. Although it's almost impossible for the work not to be about that, I wanted the conversation to be broader and for the images to sit, within this art narrative in a more universal way. So that's the story that I'm going with. Like, that's why I do it. And words come for me after I finish the work. I'm not going into it like thinking about all this stuff, because it doesn't make good work, I don't think, when you have like all these words in your head first. You just kind of like go with what looks good, what feels good. So technically, yeah, that's why. Okay.
So then leading to that, so the color that you're choosing, how do you get to the background? Because to me, a lot goes on in those spaces that you've called in the past liminal spaces, right? Yeah. How do you, because you adjust them, and I know you change them a lot, right?
Now, I don't know why, but now the further I got into my career, the more complicated things got all of a sudden. So like, I would start something and then like have to change the background color, which is the real pain in the ass. But I usually now, I know how to use Photoshop a little bit. And so now I can like test out and see what I like ahead of time.
Mm-hmm.
When I was making like, I don't know, 5 paintings a year, it didn't feel like it was that big of a deal because I could really take my time. But now that this is like my job, it's a little different. So you have to learn how to move more efficiently.
Yeah.
So I have color swatches. I save a lot of pictures, and just create different references of like color combinations that I see that I like out in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll, obviously the Pantone book, and now I try to like piece it all together ahead of time. But it's really hard because I try to like be original. So I find myself, I have my favorite colors that I like to fall back on and use, but I try to create new colors if I can that are, specific to the work and
right.
not, a color that anybody can make.
Right. So do you consider those, this is a weird question. Do those color areas carry content for you?
No.
Okay.
I think in the beginning, you feel like it has to, because you kind of got to get grad school out your head. You know what I mean? Like you want to like give everything a word and a meaning. Mm-hmm. But I think at the end of the day, it's about me really dealing with the figure, and that background color is a way for me to get that part of it out of the way. Although it's very much a part of the painting.
Right.
But it doesn't hold the same meaning as the figure itself, but I have to place the figure somewhere and to put it in a beautiful color field, like that works for me because your main focus is still the figure. Right.
So I asked you this recently, and I just can't get it out of my head. I asked you about light, like the sense there. To me, there's such a strong sense of light in a lot of them, right? And the color sort of emits it itself, but you're also sort of describing the light, via sort of shadow or light and shadow, But to me, that color also, those color combinations sometimes, is that interesting to you? Is that of interest to you, the idea of light?
Yeah, it's like, sometimes, like in this painting and specifically, it took me a minute to figure out like what was gonna go with what. You know, like his t-shirt was not the color that I wanted to use, and then I had to figure out, you know, yeah, there's a lot that goes into it because everything has to work together, and the paintings are so simple in a way that there can be no missteps. You know what I mean? Like everything has to tell, the color story has to kind of really be fluid.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense.
That makes sense. So now the tough question. So abstraction, what's your relationship to abstraction? Because could you see this as you know, of course it's figurative. We make those distinctions between figuration and abstraction, right? Do you make those distinctions in your own work?
I did in the beginning. It's something that I look at and wish I could do, but I don't have the personality for it. So I don't see it in my work necessarily. I feel like to be able to paint an abstraction means that you're able to leave things undone. And I don't have that in me to do. You know, even, you know, I don't know whether I told you this the other day, but like I even struggle with like making like really high highlights.
Yeah.
Because I can't like mark there and leave it.
Yeah.
Like kind of, you know, so I'll find myself making the same white mark for like an hour, and then I step back and I have to go back and do it again because like I've taken it away. So I'm not very good at leaving things undone. And I think the art of great abstraction, for me, is like it having symmetry and a figure story in a way, but there's also like knowing when to leave things undone and when to push further. And for me, I like everything like neatly tied up.
Do you have a favorite abstract painter? Just curious. That's terrible. I just made that up, by the way.
And as soon as you asked the question, I forgot. But I mean, off the top of my head, like the, you know, the obvious greats like Rothko, like he's, you know, just his two color story is like it's so dynamic, amazing to me.
Yeah.
I'll probably tell you some more before this is over, but yeah.
No, that's cool. You know, you could make an argument that there's some of Rothko in what we're seeing. You know, there's that sort of, it allows you, that color space allows you to enter into it. You know. Anyway, so another conversation. But okay, now, what makes a great portrait? If you had to describe that to someone, what's essential about a great portrait? What is that?
So for me, it is that there's something about it that's living and breathing, and I don't think that always happens just because you know how to render it well. When I studied with Nerdum in Norway, he told us, he was randomly talking to us one day about his ideas of heliocentricism and geocentric. So heliocentric and geocentric. And he's definitely stretched the definition of it, but he feels like good paintings are heliocentric, which means that no matter what the timeline in history, a person can come to them and relate, you know, and not have to understand, like, you know, if it's Andy Warhol's Brillo box, and you kind of have to be living in that time, and, you know, to understand what that work is about. But otherwise, that's what makes good work. So another thing that he said was, he showed us these two landscapes that were painted exactly the same, but by two different artists. And when I say exactly the same, like they kind of had the same hand. Mm-hmm. And they weren't highly realistic. They were very painterly. But one of them was alive and the other one was like just very flat. Mm-hmm. Until you see it, you don't realize that kind of like magic ever existed. Yeah. But my mind was blown. I was like, this is crazy, because this is just like a painting of a landscape with some trees, and this is a painting of a landscape with some trees. But this one has this feeling of eternity in it. And this one, it stops on the canvas. And So for me, that's what makes a good painting, like having the capacity to be able to somehow make that happen. And I don't know how it happens. I don't know how it happens. I don't know how it happens, but if you know, next time you go to a museum, like if you are looking at work, like you can kind of see that. I don't know.
Yeah.
I get all like stuttery because I really don't know how to explain it.
No.
But that happens, that makes it like it's a breathing thing. It could be a vase, it could be whatever it is. And maybe it's about being able to bring light into it from inside out versus outside in.
Mhm.
But it's definitely a skill. And once you can see it, then I feel like you could probably like do it, but you have to be smart enough to see it. This probably sounds really confusing. I don't know.
No, that sounds totally right on, as far as I'm concerned. And that to me makes the most sense in terms of explaining masterworks, regardless of what I asked you about a great portrait, but that could be a great anything, as you say. Like it could be, a cup or whatever it is. If it's made with that, if it's made to be conscious, right, to be like living, and it's like, how do you do that? But you have to recognize it and see it in something, right? And then you can potentially learn to do it or know what that process is to do it.
Yeah, because then you get it, then you understand like your paintings have not been that all this time.
Yeah. So the question? Yeah.
Like this is like a real painting,
Right. So which begs the question, okay, so what's the first painting that you made that you knew you were doing that?
Probably the one that we started with Well Prepared and Maladjusted, the girl with the pink shirt and white polka dots.
Mm-hmm. Can you say why? Can you say the moment that you knew? Was there something about it in particular? Was it a day you walked in the studio? Was it, after?
Yeah. I knew a lot of things after I made that painting. Like I knew I finally figured out something that I felt like could possibly be important enough to become a part of the art historical narrative. I felt like because on the journey to think about like what your art DNA is and like what kind of work you're gonna make,
mm-hmm.
there's a strategy. There's a strategy to that. There's a strategy to like to being able to look around the art world and like go to art fairs and like see what the climate is, and then figure out. It's like any other business in a way. It's like, where is there an opportunity for me to create space for myself and be a voice that's different from all these other voices, or to be a disruptor. That's like the term they use in technology.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, in the process of trying to figure this work out for a whole year, I didn't paint anything. I just kind of, was like really depressed and like pretty down, and hard on myself. But it's like I was trying to figure out what was going to be good enough, because I knew that my work from grad school was not sophisticated enough to get me where I needed to go. And that's the first thing, that you have to be honest with yourself about the work that you're making and think about whether or not it's big enough. Like, is it big enough? Is it speaking enough? Is it speaking to the future and the past at the same time? Like those are the, like when I look at Kehinde Wiley's work, like what he did in that moment was really smart, because he took a narrative that was current and married it to a narrative from the past. And like, that was something that, I had never seen done before. And that's what got him to the top, because he did something that was like really important and made it so that he became a part of the art historical narrative, because he was painting the art historical narrative,
Right.
There's a strategy into figuring out like how to make it into the art world, of like, that's where you want to be.
Sure.
And you have to have a keen sense of like what's missing. And the same way that you would think about like starting a business, and you would look at like your competition and like figure out like where you could fit in, how you could be different, and so that you're not being a derivative of something.
Mm-hmm. But for that, I know that you took that time and you were really contemplating that, and I know that was part of what you were contemplating. Did the
When I made that painting, that's what I felt. Like I was like, this is it. All that to answer your question. Like I was like, painting is it. Like I think I did it.
But did you?
Because I, you know, like intuitively, I felt fear because I felt like it was so good that it could be taken away.
Yes.
If you want to keep it a secret until you can like actually get it
so
made, so that nobody can say that they thought of it first.
Yeah. Did you? How about this? Did you think about the business model before you made it or after you made that painting?
I thought about it after.
Okay, after, yeah.
Yeah.
So then I'm looking.
It's like I thought about, you know, who I would be, like in the room full of all these artists that are like being given platforms in museums right now.
Yeah.
If I was sitting in a circle with them and we're all sitting in chairs, like what would my voice be? What would I say if I had paintings coming out of my mouth? You know? That's what I tried to figure out. And what I saw was that as far as my contemporaries were concerned, that at that time, nobody was making work about Blackness that didn't have anything to do with contention or resistance or, you know, nothing that had anything to do with leisure, you know what I mean? Or like just being there, you know, just like paintings of like Black people just being there. And I was like, I think that's what I wanted to make, but I also like, that's how I like to live in the world. You know what I mean? I was also like trying to figure out like who I really was at the same time and wanted to get down to like the core of my own humanity and what I would be without all of these other things that I had been taught about, like religion and like all this other stuff. You know what I mean? Like who is Amy Sherald really without the race, without the gender? Because that's where expansion really happens and that's where we really grow. And that's what brought me to that work, so that I wasn't like repeating history. I was like creating history.
That's a great answer. Yeah, because you got it, all of it. You got it, the sort of broad universality, and you got it to the personal as well. We titled this talk, you know, we took part of your title, right? Believed in the good. And I was thinking about it and I was like, believed in the good. You know, thinking about you, thinking about how I know you as a person, but what I see in the paintings. And I would say that sort of sums up a kind of component of the core. There's a belief, there's an optimism in you, there's a belief in a good, there's a belief in what's in one's self, right? That comes out. And then, you know, your expression is your expression. Like you know, you can't, anyway, but that's getting ahead. I wanted to make this interesting point. You talk about Bo Bartlett, that experience with object permanence, Bo Bartlett's painting. I was just thinking about that too, because it's kind of like, that was a seminal experience for you, right? Of seeing that painting. But I was thinking about what the notion of object permanence is, right? It's that idea that, you know, as a kid, like you think things are going to go away if they're not there. And so much of your paintings, like the power of your paintings, the power of a great work, right, is something that some people won't even see your painting in person. Most people probably won't. And yet it sticks in you, you know, on a level. And I think, so ironically, you're kind of creating that object permanence, right? You're creating this experience for people, even if they can't see it in person. That's a great thing to me. That's really, really exciting. So anyway, that's not a question. I was just making that. And you actually answered 2 in 1, because I was thinking what makes a great portrait and then what makes it last over time. Yeah. So 2 good ones. So I'm trying not to go over questions that I've seen you answer a million times, but I've got to address it since we're looking at the painting of Michelle Obama. So I wanted to see if you would, the two commissions, do you see them? And I'm talking about Michelle Obama and Breonna Taylor. Is there a difference in how you approach them?
Yes. Yeah. Well, actually, I mean, like technically, no. Like with Michelle, I went straight to the internet to look at photographs of ways that she had been portrayed and tried to do something that was the opposite of that, like opposite of like this public personality. With Brianna, I guess it was a little bit different because I didn't have as much history. And I didn't have a body to photograph. And I was working from images that I was put in touch with her mom, and her mom sent me images from like Instagram and Snapchat, which like wasn't ideal for me because there's a way that we pose ourselves on Instagram that's very different, you know? So I decided to, because I normally don't, I was like, I'm not going to do any more commissions. I said after Michelle, like, no more commissions. It's like people think I'm a commission artist, and I'm like, this is not, it's not what I do.
Right.
But this is a moment in history that I couldn't pass up. And it was the first time I'd ever painted anybody, that wasn't alive and breathing.
Yeah.
So it felt weird. It felt a little weird to go down to Baltimore and like put a dress on somebody and photograph their body only to chop their head off and like Photoshop her face onto that figure. Mm-hmm. But I felt like it was the only way that I could really get a true sense of herself. So like I found a model that was the same size and the same height. And I went through the same thing, went through a series of dresses, although I was working with Michelle's stylist for her dresses, and the other ones I like found a designer that sent me a few images, and then I sent those images to Brianna's mom. And then Brianna's mom was like, I don't really see her wearing any of these. And I was like, that's great. So like 2 weeks to finish this painting, and her mom was like, these dresses aren't great. So at that point, I knew I had to take it in my own hands and just like do what I thought would be good for everybody, which is like me, Brianna, and Vanity Fair. And so it worked out. Like she loved the painting, but yeah, so the process was the same. Source the clothes, photograph the picture, figure out, how it's going to be presented. And for Michelle, as you probably already heard, like I picked this dress because I had narrowed it down to two. Like one of them was a designer named Tom Brown. His work is like very fantastical and like kind of reminded me of my initial inspiration in this and ideas with like the movie Big Fish. Mm-hmm. It also reminded me of like who she was the first 4 years, which I think is somebody, her style had evolved from, over the course of the 8 years. And this dress was really a way for me to give not only, her portrait has meaning, but also to make everything in this painting have meaning. And so this pattern in relation to quilting and Black women and that part of American history, and then art history. I think I mentioned Piet Mondrian. Mm-hmm. And then I really liked the material because it sat up by itself, and I was able to like create this kind of, pyramid effect, where she's sitting on top of something that is two-dimensional and three-dimensional at the same time. Like the way that I pushed it off with the canvas on the left side, I wanted the dress to be like a painting in itself. Mm-hmm.
For sure.
The whole thing was a focal point. With Brianna, I decided that everything should be the same color so that you're really just focused on her face, because the magazine cover is very different than, the painting.
Right. How the painting is the painting? How big is the painting? The one that you made for Vanity Fair. How big is that canvas?
43.
Okay. So I don't want to take too much. I probably got time for one more question, and I want to ask you about the new gouache paintings that you made over COVID.
Yeah, those were like a nightmare. I hated them, but then
sorry, maybe I shouldn't ask you that.
I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm a Virgo. I don't know, but like I like familiarity. I like doing one thing and I like sticking to it. Like I wake up every morning, I drink the same kind of tea, the same brand. Like everything's the same.
Yeah, me too.
Ready for a show, I find one outfit and I wear the same outfit pretty much every day until it's done. Like it's I like that. I grew up going to private school and I had to wear uniforms, and I like uniforms.
Me too.
Um, so breaking away and working with watercolor or gouache, which is something that I did as a child, like in art class, and always hated because I didn't have control over it, and I like to be in control. And obviously, all my paintings like look like I like control because like everything is super tight and together.
I wouldn't have said that.
It was hard, you know, but I wanted to do something, and so like yes, I went into it and it sucked. I went into it like half-assed. And that's what I got, a product that was half-assed. And then I decided like, let me just like really just focus and get into this. And it was difficult because I was also there caregiving for my sister who had just had surgery, and like just, you know, I don't know about everybody else, but I spent like the first month of COVID like literally physically standing in front of my TV for like hours, just like looking at the numbers and like watching the news like over and over again. So it was a little bit distracting, but what I realized is that, like anything else, if you keep doing something, you get better. So.
And you're making these paintings that are on the kitchen table, like table size, like.
Just I didn't even know what kind of. I was like Googling like, what should I order? Like cold press paper or hot press paper? Like what's the difference? And I still, you know, I can't remember what I got, but I just kind of like tore them with a ruler and made these little squares. Nothing too intimidating. They started out a little bigger, but then I realized like that was going to be too much. And I just went back to, these are all images that I took at some point. Like some of them were at the Joan Mitchell residency of like, that never made it to be a painting. Because I needed to reshoot them and I didn't get the opportunity to do so. And the more I painted, the better I got. And, you know, I realized that I could kind of still layer in the same way and everything is not as permanent as I thought it was, you know? So it ended up being really fun. And now I think it's something that I want to do because I don't make a lot of work anyway. And so it makes the work more accessible.
Yeah, I think everybody, and that's on Hauser's site right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, everybody should check those out because there's a sort of real beauty to them. I mean, not that there isn't beauty to all of your work, there is, but there's a sort of like shimmering kind of, you know, shimmering line that I think is really cool.
Yeah, I mean, to me, like that was abstract because like I couldn't make, you know, like the eye was just like literally like a little, you know.
Yeah.
Paint it because they're so small.
Yeah, yeah. The reason I ask about it, besides the fact that I absolutely love them when I saw them, is I'm sort of thinking of studio school students at the same time in our audience. But I love that you're willing to try something new at this stage, right? At any stage you're willing to pick it up and try it, even though you say it's not exactly what you want to be doing, you know, whatever. It's not what you normally do. I'm very habitual myself, you know. But
I mean, I had nothing else to do too, and that helped because I'm constantly, when you're making like getting ready for shows or whatever, it's like you don't really feel like you have time to play. You know what I mean? Like I told you the other day, it's like, you're like, what medium do you use? And I'm like, I use Liquin. And I said, I have Galkit and other stuff sitting right here, but I don't have time to play around with it and like figure out if it's gonna work or not. So I just keep doing what I know, you know?
Right.
So it also kind of came down to that. Like I always thought, well, you know, I'll have like a couple of months where I can like sit down and draw and like do some stuff and see what comes of it. But I just never had that time. And then COVID having the shelter in place offered me that time.
Yeah, I wanted to bring out, just from what I know of you, I mean, you can read about your story, but you care and you have cared for family members multiple times in your lives and during pretty traumatic situations. You have a heart transplant. You work about as hard as I've seen anyone work. And for anybody that doesn't know that, I'm telling you now, she works harder than anyone I know, and cares to incredible extent. So that's part of why I'm asking this. So Sam, do I want to open this up, or would you like me to keep asking? Because I have a couple more if you want.
Sorry, I have to unmute myself. It's totally up to you and Amy.
Amy, is there anything else? Is there anything you'd like to address? Like, is there anything you'd like to bring out that I haven't touched on?
I mean, just speaking to what you just said, it's like, I worked hard because I wasn't the best. And so I always tell people I wasn't like the best painter in grad school. Like I totally sucked. And I make a joke and I say anybody who like knew me in grad school would never, ever, ever think that I'd be where I am now based on the paintings that I was making in grad school.
Time out, I wouldn't have said that.
You would.
In fact, I didn't say that. But go ahead.
Just as far as like, you know, when you are a student, like be patient with yourself and your pace, because everybody's life happens at a different pace. And there's a lot of people out there that paint way better than I do, but they don't work as hard as I do. And I think that's what's really important is like, is constantly pushing forward. A lot of people don't have the stamina and the drive and the ability to be uncomfortable and comfortable with risk in order to keep jumping these hurdles over and over and over and over again and have all these doors closed in your face like over and over and over again until you get to something good. You know what I mean? And then once you get there, you realize like, well, the work I was making 6 years ago, although I thought it was really great, like it really wasn't that good yet, you know, but you think that you're at this place where you should be getting these things, but you're probably not quite there yet, you know, so you just have to continue to push forward and push yourself and push forward. And like the hard workers are the ones that usually rise to the top.
Yeah, that's really well said. And yeah, and you have, and it'd be fascinating to have a really long conversation where you outlined what those components were, you know, are to being successful, because it's certainly not just, you know, one thing, it's all these things, right? And it's not just being able to paint, we know that. It's not just being organized, it's not just knowing the right people, it has so many factors involved, but hard work is certainly a major component. But also, and I said it in the introduction, there's a generosity that I'm going to come back to again and again that comes out in your work. And I know that's vague, or that sense of what we talk about of being, of making something alive, of making that thing exist, right? Because that requires a surrendering, which I know, it's like, you know it when you see it. It's, you find your models in the street, you know it when you see them, right? And you try to explain, it's like, as you say, trying to explain falling in love to someone that's never, heard it in a song or read it in a poem or had any sense of it. Yeah, so you have to speak in metaphor because, but it is a tangible practice that you know and you work at. And I want to point that out to everybody because it looks like, oh, yeah, this just happens. And it doesn't, it just doesn't.
Yeah,
So.
it doesn't, and like life will throw curveballs at you. I mean, I didn't paint for 4 years after grad school because I had to take care of family. But I kept painting in my head. Like I didn't pick up a brush. And you feel like you may, things will happen where you feel like you're moving backwards or not moving at all. And I was like in my 30s. So between 30 and 33, it was like nothing was happening. But it's like, your time is your time. And, I could have given up and been like, I'm too old to do this, but I was too stupid to do that. So I kept pushing forward, I mean, honestly, I don't know what else I would have done. Like, I don't have any other skills outside of like being a great chef. And like, I'm not going to go back to nursing school because I don't feel like I could pass biology. You know what I mean? Like, I'm a caregiver, but like, I don't know what else I would have done. Like, so I had no other choice. And like, I had that fear in me when I even applied to grad school and I didn't get into Hofburger and I got first, got put on the waiting list.
Right.
I remember looking in the mirror and I'm like, what am I going to do with my life? Like, am I just going to be a waitress for the rest of my life? Because I don't know what else I'm going to do if I can't move forward in my work. Like, then I have to reassess my whole life and figure out like how I'm going to move forward. But then it happened. So. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, I wanted people to know that because, was it true? The rumor I did hear from, I don't know if it was you, if it was from a rumor, did you produce that work that you applied with at Hofburger quickly, like all in one go? Okay. I think I spoke to you about that. Yeah.
Yeah. Random. It was so bad. I didn't even know though. I was just like I said, if I had known if I had even like done my research and like looked at who my who was going to be in my cohort, I would have never applied.
Me too. Yeah. Yeah. Well, Sam, do we want to give people an opportunity to jump in?
Yeah, that sounds good. I think I have to stop sharing, so I'm gonna do that, and we should be good. Okay, yeah. So yeah, so it looks like we've got a bunch of questions. That was great. I will give an applause for on behalf of our audience. I do wish this were in at our building on H Street, and we could it would be a boisterous applause, but just get me for now. Let's see. I've got a question from Stacy. She says, "Thank you, fantastic conversation, very powerful work, Amy, very inspiring. Can you talk a bit more about the influence of photography in your work? Were there photographers or photographs that influenced you in particular?"
It was photography that really it wasn't my inspiration in the beginning, but it became an affirmation for what I was doing, and therefore became my inspiration. So it was cinematography. It was the movie Big Fish that really inspired my work and like got all these juices flowing, and like me trying to figure out me watching that movie and having a moment where I was like, I want this to be a part of my narrative too, this kind of frivolity. And so that was my jumping off point. And then as I proceeded to make more work and I started to do research, because I was having to like then write about what I was doing, and I came across photographs that really resonated with me. And those were like, you know, daguerreotypes and photographs of Black families, and you know, those kind of images that that I grew up with, because I have one image of my grandmother. And once the camera was invented, you can see the difference of representation of like how we were able to author our own narratives versus like the, you know, propaganda that would be pushed out there based on like racist ideology in the South and wherever. So I really connected to that kind of those like really dignified, and you know, the image of my grandmother's like she's self-made and sitting in herself and like gazing out at you in a way that's like truly powerful. And I started to connect those two things together. And I guess it was Du Bois's photographs that he had put together for an exhibition in Paris of like Georgia Negroes, where I realized that, you know, my work is kind of being employed in that same way. And there are like respectability politics involved in that a lot. You know, I think there's a part of me growing up in the South and being born in 1973 and like growing up like so close to where the civil rights movement was and like the residual effects of racism like that still existed at that time, that a lot of my identity was performative and was about proving myself to be the same as you know, the people that I say I went to school with or whatever. So those photographs have a deep meaning and can be employed in many different ways. And I wanted the work to kind of speak to that. And there's something about they're, you know, like you can see the souls of these people in these images and like the way that their eyes, you know, told these stories. And there's a heaviness to it, like not a sadness, but a heaviness. And there's a weight, like they've been grounded in something. And I wanted my work to kind of feel the same way, like to have that kind of strength and presence and groundedness. Did I answer your question? Wait, was that? yeah, so that was it. And then obviously I worked from photographs, but that's how I made my way to the photography.
Mhm.
Well, here's a follow-up question, I think, apropos from an anonymous person. Uh, since the photographic source material is such a big role in your process, conversely, do you ever draw from life or work from life, sketching the models in person?
I haven't in a long time. Um, I can't see very well. Like these glasses look really cool, but my lenses are so I feel like if I did that, the paintings would be very different. Like they would definitely be looser because I am very nearsighted. Um, I do it for fun when I'm around my family, but I think the working for a digital image is truer to my style in the sense that I like the flatness, the conversation between like the flatness and something that's like well rendered. So my faces are very different. Like some of my paintings, like, you know, the clothes are like very flat and like very two-dimensional. And I really like that kind of graphicness. And I don't like the pressure of having somebody sit in front of me. It's you know, it's one thing to do it in class, but then like for me, like to bring a model in, and then if that was my practice, I would not feel comfortable, like, you know, as an introvert. Like, I don't know, it's just weird. I think it's just weird for me, like it's just weird. And when I studied with Art Nerdrum, that's what he did, and that's how he worked. And that's how I worked when I, you know, studied with him for the 4 months that I was there, and it was really great. But I didn't purposely, you know, turn away from it. But it's just like this is the direction that my journey went, and I realized that it like the digital image really serves me better.
Um, Deja Davis is asking, it seems like you embody the feeling you try to portray in your paintings. So would you ever consider painting yourself?
Yeah, I have, and I probably would do it real soon. I just I can't see myself. I don't know. I can't see myself. So I'm like, my setback is like trying to figure out like what I want to wear, which is crazy. But I'm like, I don't know how I have to see myself seeing myself in order to do this, and I haven't done it yet. But um, Jordan Castile and I, another painter, we speak a lot, and we were talking during COVID about doing self-portraits like for our next shows. But I didn't have time to do it for this one, but it's coming.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah.
One of our graduating students this year who's been, we've actually managed to have in-person exhibitions at the studio school. Joe Ward, he's asking, he says, you talked about using fields of colors as backgrounds. Some of your paintings also have specific scenes. We saw a couple of those, I think. Can you talk about why you started using the scenes, or your choose to use scenes versus specific colors?
Yeah, it just seemed like a natural progression. I think as my I don't know, like you start doing something and that's what you do and that's what you think you're gonna do. And then like, you know, it started with me like moving to a different space, and then I had a little more space, and I knew I wanted to make bigger paintings, but I didn't know what that would mean. You know, I also give myself these rules and like these boundaries that I tell myself I have to stay in. So I'm like, well, if I make a bigger painting, what does that mean? And I didn't want to I wanted to explore a larger narrative with multiple figures, but it took me about 3 or 4 years to come to a place where I felt like it was going to serve the work, because I just didn't want to make big paintings for the sake of making big paintings. And I think once I started to think about like how I wanted to separate myself from from the pack, and kind of set my work within the genre of American realism, then it kind of opened me up to those ideas of like creating these American moments. And then it started to make sense. So now, like I'm making 3 larger paintings for the show and 3 smaller ones. And I'm just, it's an expansion of my visual vocabulary in a way. I'm able to say a lot more with these paintings. And they've gotten, I did that one that we saw with the rocket, I did that one in Baltimore, but in Baltimore, my studio only had like a regular size door. So everything I did had to be like 7 feet one way or the other, you know? So I had those kind of limitations. But at my studio here, where I am now, the door is like really big. It's like, so I'm able to like, go bigger, and it makes sense to go bigger, and the works kind of, they tell a bigger story about this Americanness that I'm exploring. Okay.
Do we have, we're at about an hour. Do we have time for a couple more questions?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. An anonymous person is asking, maybe this reflects off of Jim's earlier question about abstraction, but they ask, besides Kehinde Wiley, what artists do you look to for inspiration? You mentioned Jordan Castile. I was also, I was thinking like Ang, I was thinking about Ang, like just being in a school of like Ang, like that kind of drawing, or de Kooning, early de Kooning even.
Who do I look to? It really always comes back to Bo. I really feel like we're doing the same thing, but he's making his from like a white male perspective, and I'm doing the same thing from a Black, let's say like white American and Black American, and they're the same but different. And then what's his name? Well, so Wes Anderson and the photographer, Cruden. What's his name? You know what I'm talking about? Greg Crudson, what is it?
I'm not sure, I'm trying to help you out.
You know what I'm talking about?
I don't.
Hold on, Gregory Cruz, is it? He's a photographer and he sets up these like really amazing scenes. They're very quiet. It's usually like one person or 2 people in these kind of rural areas. Yeah, Gregory Crudson, somebody wrote it, Gregory Crudson.
That's right.
I love him. I love him. So
yeah.
I think I may have come across his work and that really, I might be making this up though, but like, I think he was like part of the inspiration of like, exploring that, because I think our paintings have the same, his photography, my paintings like this year are the same kind of quietness. And yeah, they're just really, they're really deep and psychological. And I don't know, they're just so great. Him, Wes for color palette. I look at a lot of designers too. Like I really love Tom Brown. Color pattern right now, I'm like loving Cynthia Rowley. Like I guess I don't go to traditional sources for those things, because painting wasn't yeah, because movies were my, like, I guess movies were my jam, and like where I really like saw like direct, because a lot of this is like with these bigger paintings, it's like directing. And so you're looking at like, you know, like these different frames and trying to piece together the composition. And I guess Eric Fischel and Katz and Jenny Seville is one of my favorite. Always. And I love a lot. I mean, I love Lynette. I love, I love a lot of work, but my inspiration really comes from within.
Yeah. An anonymous person is asking, how long will you work on your paintings?
Between a month and 2 months, depends however long it takes till it's done. The larger paintings usually take about 2 months. Yeah, no, Kerry James Marshall wasn't an influence. I didn't know who he was, unfortunately. When I started making this work, I graduated from Micah not knowing who Kerry James Marshall was, not knowing who Barclay Hendricks was. So when I did come across this work, it was at an exhibition at the BMA, and I walked in and freaked out because I thought I had to stop painting what I was painting. But then I called my mentor, and he's like, what you're doing is very different. And so that was fine. So I'm glad I didn't see him prior to that, because I may not have gone down that route, because in my mind, I would have been like, oh, he doesn't paint complexion. And so now I had to figure something else out. So I'm happy it happened that way.
Stacy is asking why the movie Big Fish in particular has come up a few times in the talk.
Because in the process of, so I going to see Carol Walker's exhibition, it's like in 2008, I going to see her exhibition. I love her work. And when I left there, I was just trying to figure out like how to process it and like what it meant for me in my life at that moment. And like I said, a lot of work was about, it's kind of didactic or like, I wanted to make something that was like free from that, from that was extricated from my historical narrative as a Black American, right? So you kind of get stuck in that, even with, I used to say that like being Black is like, it's like a verb. And so like it's seen as something that's like in the public eye, is something that's like always in resistance to something and fighting for something. And when I watched Big Fish, I was like, I felt a little like envious, because I was like, I want to see and have, like this kind of frivolity and fun and like fantasy, to be able to like see a movie outside of like The Wizard of Oz that, had some kind of different narrative to it, that wasn't about, fighting for my humanity, for my civil rights, or the effects of slavery, or any of that stuff. And so I think for me, that was like the initial light bulb went off of like, this is what I don't see when I go to museums. Like I don't see Black people just being Black. Or, so if you look at my earlier work, like a lot of it, like they're kind of costumey, well puppets and like, different things, because I was really inspired by that. But then I realized that this kind of, these kinds of Black Americans that I'm making up, like they already exist in the world, and we're already living outside of that narrative in a lot of ways. And that, they're there for me to document. And then I had some feelings of guilt, because you feel as if like, you really, as a Black American, like I really walk around feeling like if everybody's not free, then I can't be free. And the weight of having to think about my community and the work that we have to do on a daily basis, and like keeping a balance between that kind of responsibility generationally, and not bringing too much of that into the work, but being present with it at the same time. And so Big Fish was like an escape. It was an escape. And so I like to think of my work as the same thing. It's like, it's a place where you can see a reflection of yourself that's not in contention or in resistance, and you can breathe, so the work is really about the interior space and interior life versus the exterior life, which is how, there's a public identity that we have as Black people, and then there's who we really are outside of all the chaos. And this work is about who we really are outside of all the chaos.
I think you've covered most of the rest of the questions that I have here. There's a couple questions about the Michelle Obama portrait, and I guess one question asking how it came to be, and just portraiture in general, which I think we've talked about. But do you also feel like you get to know that person in the photograph in a different way, or is it more of a comes from a different source for you in the making of the painting, like that personality? That makes sense.
Yeah. Well, there's I'll try to marry these two questions about the painting. So wait, I forgot what you said because I was reading. But so the first one is, so how was I selected? I was selected by, so the National Portrait Gallery started commissioning portraits of the First Lady and President, like with the Clintons, I believe. So like at the end of the administration, they sent them a portfolio. I was in the portfolio, got shortlisted. Michelle and Barack invited me to come in and have a conversation with them in the White House. They were briefed, or they knew who I was, what my work was like. And so it was just really a 30-minute conversation about like what else I did in the world, how I painted, why I painted what I painted, so on and so forth. I selected her dress. I selected 2 dresses out of the 11 dresses that Meredith sent me. And the day of the shoot, we had 2 dresses to photograph her in, and she came in that one, and I decided to only photograph her in that one. And we all agreed that it was, like she felt, I could tell she was feeling herself in that dress. It was nice. Do I consider this to be a portrait? And what do you feel the place of portraiture is in your work? Can you talk about portraiture in general? So I slip in and out of that vocabulary. As far as like portraiture, I've never been called a portraitist until I painted Michelle, so it's kind of funny. But I don't consider them portraits necessarily, because Michelle is a portrait, although she represents something bigger than just herself in that work. I don't consider my paintings portraits, because once the figure is on the canvas, and once the model leaves, like it really becomes about my idea. So, my model's name can be John, but I'm not making a painting of John, like I'm making a painting of this idea that I had in my head. So I don't really consider them portraits, but oftentimes that vocabulary is used around it. And I'm not offended by it, but I think portraits are, for me anyway, a portrait of a person is something that's like non-conceptual. And for me, my work is conceptual. I think that the figures are present and they know why they're there. You know, they're there to make eye contact with you and engage you. Yeah, so portraits are different. Portraits are different. Like they're just a painting of a person. You know, it's just a painting of a person that. Yeah, yeah. So no, I don't think. I know I'm mumbling now, but I don't consider the paintings to be portraiture. But I know a lot of people do.
Well, maybe just another question here, which I think is kind of funny. Lisa Davis says, "My jaw is dropped that you did not learn about Kerry James Marshall or Barclay Hendricks at MICA." So my question is, how do you feel about MFA education?
I think MFAs are great. I think if you're a Black student, I can only speak from my experience as like being that kind of brown person, then it can be difficult because a lot of times the faculty may not be capable of having the kind of conversations with you that you need. And as great as Grace Hardigan was, she was still a white woman, and she saw me differently than I saw myself, because for like the first year she thought I was biracial, and I'm not biracial, and so she had this idea in her head of like who I was when I wasn't that person. So it was difficult, and even the Black students that I'm in touch with now that did go to Hofburger, it's almost like they're left to their own means to bring in Black artists to have a conversation with just them. You know what I mean? So like I get emails, it's like, you know, my director told me that, you know, to ask you if you wanted to come in to have a conversation with us. So it's like the directors aren't, they know what's going on in the greater art world, but it was like, if you're a Black artist, then they might not know who you are unless, you know, you're like one of the top 5, I don't know. But so they just never crossed. They just never, and maybe that's my fault. Like maybe I didn't spend enough time in the library, but I did spend a lot of time in the library. But like I never came across I didn't come across this work till I went to the BMA to see a show. And the same, I believe Kara Walker, we did learn about Kara Walker, didn't we? Didn't we have to go to the talk, Jim? Yeah. But yeah, Kara and Kehinde were the 2 artists that I graduated, and Whitfield Lavelle, for who I learned about. And then I learned about Deborah Willis and her photography. And that was like really, Dr. Hammond brought me that book, and it kind of stuck in my psyche. But there wasn't really a lot of conversation about that. You know, it was a lot of conversation about abstract expressionism and her life and her stories. And those were important parts of history. So that's how it happened.
That's true. Well, I think there's a couple of questions to see the watercolor, the gouache works, and I think you can see those on the
yeah, they're on housework.com. I don't have any. I asked Gabriana, like I could walk the painting over here real quick if somebody want to see it, but it's
how large is that painting? And it just lives in the studio?
For now, yeah. It's gonna be acquired by a museum.
Oh, awesome.
Can you walk the painting over?
Yeah. Well, as long as somebody takes any pictures and posts
Yeah, you can. Well, I don't want to risk that if that's going to do that.
Well, it's not like it's a big deal, but I don't want it. It could come off as.
Yeah. So don't risk it. It's okay.
Yeah. Let's
not. Yeah.
But an anonymous person says, "Great conversation. Thank you for this. What a treat." And there's been several comments like that, and I just want to just second that and thank you both for being here. Amy, thank you again for taking the time in this really generous talk. We really appreciate it. And as I said at the beginning, this is a real highlight for our lecture series in New York Studio School, and we're just really grateful to have spent this time with you. So thank you. I don't know, Jim, if you or Amy, if you have anything else that you want to just say in closing.
I don't keep painting.
Yeah.
Before you make some good stuff.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to bring out. Amy's inspirational. I want everybody to know that. Like that's what's cool. Yeah, same for me. Like, you know, you keep going. I'll close with this actually, because I wish we were in person. Because when I was a student at this at the studio school way back, and I can't even tell you who the lecturer was, but they said, and it silenced the audience. They said, if you hit your peak, let's say that you got your dreams and you got your gallery that you really wanted, you hit your peak at like 25, and then you were dropped, would you keep painting? That was the question that I always go back to. Would I keep painting? Would I keep painting without any kind of success? And I think Amy's had like world-class success, right? And what's so clear to me is it's part of who you are. You would make those paintings regardless of whether they were being shown or not, because you have.
I asked myself though, if I hit the lottery and I won $2 million, would I still make paintings? I asked myself a lot, and I think I would, a lot less.
I would bet you would. I'll bet that million. Yeah. So yeah, that's what I want to leave you with, is that share that sentiment all those years ago.
But yeah, stay desperate, because if you don't stay desperate, you're not gonna make the work.
That's right.
Not uncomfortable, if you don't want to dig yourself out of a hole, and my hole is waiting tables, then you're not gonna make the work. If you get too comfortable and too cozy, you're probably not gonna make the work. And I feel like the energy that it takes to manifest becoming this thing, and once you get here, it's not as great as it seems. I mean, like, because it's just a lot more work. I work 6 days a week. Right now, I'm working 6 days a week from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. And I have to do that in order to, you know, make my deadline. But if I wasn't so desperate, I'm not sure I would have kept pushing forward. You know, it's really about manifesting. And I truly believe that thoughts become things. So you truly have to see yourself here and believe that you can get there in order for that kind of like magical red carpet to roll out and the right things happen at the right time. And that's how my life happened. Maybe I'm an anomaly, but it was like legit, like it's, you know, you can be right before the announcement of the Michelle Obama painting, I was in my studio working towards Untitled Art Fair for Art Basel. I was $1,500 away from zero money in my account. I didn't know how I was even going to buy the stretcher to make the Michelle Obama portrait. I knew I had been nominated for a grant, and I was like, if I don't get this grant, then I'm screwed. So it's like whenever you're at that precipice and you're about to fall into the deep pits of hell, like that's when you really have your antennas out the most, and like you continue to save yourself because you draw that energy to you and those things happen that you need to happen, right? So like that, it sounds like magical thinking, but that's the only thing that's going to get you through this is magical thinking, right? It's like you have to believe in something that you can't see and it's not empirical. So you can work hard and it may not happen. And you also have to be okay with that. But I got that grant and like continually, like, you know, like things just happen, but it's like you just have to be able to like move in the dark for a little while and like keep pushing forward.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant. Right on. Thank you. I hope there's an open invitation to come to the studio school on 8th Street. I hope we get to visit each other sometime in the future in person. Thanks again, Amy. Thank you, Jim. And thank you to our audience. This is wonderful.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
All right. Have a good night.